What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hawks-centric podcast, hosted by yours truly, David Lee, aka D Lee for three. Slightly different types of episodes today. We're not looking at Hawks games. We're more so talking about draft prospects, philosophies, fits, guys we like, guys we may be a little bit lower on. I'm blessed to be joined by my guys, Paul, who's at his Twitter is at Sheeden ATL. He's actually not from ATL. And then we've got Ahmed. His Twitter is at Slip the Screen. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well. Excited to
I'm
get
doing
the
good as
college
well.
season. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those who honestly, I kind of like got too enveloped with the NBA season going on, but college basketball starts Monday, and it's about that time. It's a very exciting class, and thank you to everyone who submitted questions about on Twitter as well as on Substack as well. For those who are paying subscribers on Substack, you get the exclusive privilege of having every question answered. So we got 3 questions from there. We got a handful from Twitter as well. But I want to go ahead and start with this question from Abdel. He's at Abdel_Taco, also known as Taco Takes on YouTube. He started off and he said, "Who are you guys higher on going into the season, Cayden Boozer or Dash Daniels?" And I want to start with Ahmed here because I know you've got some opinions about Cayden.
Yeah, I'm a big Cayden fan. Definitely higher on Cayden moving forward. And granted, it's going to be kind of TBD on his role. I know he didn't start. I don't think he started either of the exhibitions Duke had early in the
No.
season. They had Caleb Foster start in his stead. I just think the way this Duke team has been built, especially like looking at the backcourt, they don't really have any. Caleb Foster himself is more of a combo guard. They don't really have any kind of like steadying presence. Obviously, Tyrese Proctor was huge for them last year in that respect. And I think Cayden's going to come in, step in, and just immediately provide kind of that like steadying force in the backcourt. Obviously, he's been kind of cast as like a game manager point guard, had always a stellar assist to turnover ratio, led EYBL all 3 years in assists per game, which is pretty wild to do, especially considering he's big for that archetype, big for the kind of facilitated, like passing minded guard. I mean, he's 6'5", 200 pounds. So I think Cayden's generally one of the more underrated prospects in this class, in my opinion. I definitely prefer him over Dash Daniels. And I think I wouldn't be surprised for me personally if he ended up being, PG1 in the class.
Paul,
Yeah,
love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I kind of expect Cayden to just sort of play himself into a larger role as the season goes on, because first of all, the chemistry with his brother is undeniable. I mean, they're just like, they go with like bread and butter together. And just overall, like, so his turnover reverse style of play, I think, just fits the overall philosophy of Duke very well. So yeah, I'm here with Ahmed. I'm going with Cayden as well, and I would say by a pretty significant margin. Just the one thing that I'm curious about is just and one thing that we will not see the season at Duke is just how Cayden looks outside of the context, outside of the Duke context, and just like talking more broadly outside of the context where he plays with his brother as well. But like, one of the things with Cayden is that I buy his shot just much more than I buy Dash's shot. Like with Dash, I think the problem is that I have really no idea how he scores in half court and generates volume. And with Cayden, I think this is the pathway to becoming sort of at least a neutral offensive player in terms of scoring is just way clearer than with Dash.
I do have a question for you all, because this is something that I thought about while I was watching the exhibition. But if Cam is going to be featured this heavily in the half court, will there be enough of like an offensive, I guess, initiation share for Cayden to show the level of playmaking that he did show at the AAU level? Because I do think there's in general, there's a lack of reliable guard initiation on that roster. Like, I think that you guys have spoke about it on that podcast you had with Ahmed, but kind of like how crazy Cam would have been on this past Duke team, and how sort of like, in terms of like an overall talent across the entire roster, how less talented this is. And I'm wondering whether there'll be enough for him to share or sort of like showcase what he did in AAU, because I think so much of that was in transition, but like, of course, playing off of his brother. But I'm just curious where you guys think his overall involvement will look like in the offense, because I didn't see a ton of it to both of your points, like in the exhibition.
So I think with Cayden, a lot of the flaws that people mentioned as far as like his free throw rate and his inability to score in the half court, definitely that's going to be what people, pay the closest attention to. But I think with him, what's kind of underestimated, like had been mentioned earlier, was his shooting. I think especially if he's going to be playing more off the ball, he's going to be fed in more spot up situations. I think he's going to be a pretty stellar catch and shoot guy. I mean, for his career, he's in the high 70s on a pretty, robust sample of free throws, and he's always shot well off the catch. Great on like, obviously they're not the most efficient shots. You kind of want to minimize those in any like perimeter player shot diet, but he's great on like the mid range pull ups, floaters. He has, for a guy that's never going to be scoring minded, he's always going to be, more slanted towards passing the ball, facilitating. I think he has reasonable counters in the half court, and obviously he won't be a negative spacer. He might be. No, actually, they're going to still have, some pretty stellar shooting talent with Isaiah Evans, but he might be one of their, I wouldn't be surprised, for third or fourth in 3-point efficiency for the season, just because he's going to be fed so many, catch and shoot in so many catch and shoot situations. And what you'd mentioned as far as the half court scoring is always going to be negative with Cayden. I don't think it's ever going to get to the point where he's, a plus half court scorer, but he does so much passing out of structure in transition, like you mentioned. I don't think he needs like a specific game state to really be able to play make. I think that's kind of the utility. And what I'm going to be watching really closely with the Hawks and Shire is, what does that pace look like? How comfortable is he letting the Boozer twins? And I mean, the rest of their talent, like they have a lot of great open court players, and guys like Dame Sarr and Pat to a lesser extent. I think his mobility in the open court, but I think Cayden can contribute just like those cracks to like where he doesn't have to be featured, kind of like an interstitial in between parts of the game.
Yeah, I think that in his 4 years in high school, his 3-point rate went up from like 11% to 25%, and and at the same time his shooting percentages went up as well. Yeah, I don't think he has the volume to be like a super impactful shooter in terms of like running the pick and roll or anything like that. But yeah, just like this Duke setup just caters to his strengths as a catch and shoot guy like very well, I think. So yeah. So yeah, I think like overall when talking about Cayden, I think the ability to generate volume of shots will be a big problem for him down the road. But the question was comparing him to Dash Daniels, who has all the same problems, but they're like exacerbated to an even higher extent. So
I think what kind of gave me a little bit of hope for Dash was like the previous FIBA numbers before this most recent tournament in United. His steal percentages were insane. He was getting on the glass. But then I look at his role for the NBL, and he's at a 48% true shooting percentage right now. He's still getting on the glass, 16% defensive rebounding, but like the assist to turnover ratio is just barely positive. And I just don't see, to y'all's point, where he looks like as an offensive player. But I do think if you compare him to his brother, he's a little bit further along at this point in his career, at least like on ball. Like Dyson didn't really have any semblance of a handle. I've seen a bit of counters from Dash. I've seen the ability to get 2 feet in the paint, but he kind of suffers from that same issue where it's not just a lack of shooting gravity, but it's the lack of confidence in his actual like penetration. He doesn't always drive with an intention. He's not always aware of where the help is coming from. So I think if the defensive playmaking had sort of persisted a bit more in the U19 World Cup and he was a little bit more of an impactful player on the defensive end, then I think I could have continued to have him in like that 15-ish range. I was egregiously high on him like before that tournament, and I realized like it kind of like was like a reality check that like he isn't at that point where you can put that level of stock into him. So I agree on those points. Is there anything that, because in the NBL context it's kind of confined, like he's playing less than 20 minutes a night. Is there anything that he could do, or like is there anything that you could see like in terms of him taking a step forward where you can say, okay, maybe he could be in the top 15 area of your board?
I think his stock highly because I don't believe he's going to be a good shooter ever, but I think it hinges on his improvement as a slasher, because the current numbers suggest that he's not great at that either, because he takes like 11 field goals per 40 minutes. So it's even lower than the sample for Cayden Boozer, who's not a high volume scorer himself. And as you mentioned, David, he hovers around 50% through shooting. So this is the sort of an area where I would think there's potential for improvement for him as well. And I think he's a decent connector, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think he has the handle yet to fully activate and to fully weaponize that. But yeah, if his handle improves by a significant margin, I would say he could be a potential top 20 prospect for me. And also, one thing that we have to have in mind is that he's like the youngest prospect in this draft class as well. So
yeah, just needs to find any efficient scoring avenue with him, and whether it be spacing the floor, obviously, if he just becomes more of an interior threat. I think the fact that I have it pulled up right now for Dash in his career, he's just hovering on 150 free throw attempts, so it isn't the craziest sample, but hovering at 60% from the line. So and this is the age where players can make meaningful leaps in shooting efficiency. I would just need to see that over the course of the season for him. I mean, honestly, for Dash, I think that'd be the difference between me considering him draftable or not. And something I wanted to mention with Cayden, because again, I've started, as I look towards more of like the pre-NCAA stuff with a lot of players, started to kind of lean towards more deterministic outlook. Like, I don't think guys' flaws, they can become improved upon to the point where, they can remain on the floor, but not to the extent that, it becomes a strength often times. But with Cayden in the half court scoring, something I'm going to look for with Duke and their context specifically, I want to see how often frequently he's used in handoffs. I think that's something that alleviates a lot of the stress on his handle, which is, I think, the biggest issue he has right now, at least skill-wise. And then I think that it's something Duke's kind of, ratcheted up in the past. They were 40th percentile in handoff frequency this past year compared to the previous 2 seasons where they were sub 20. So I think Cayden's always found success there, alleviates a lot of helps him get downhill, alleviates some of the pressure from the handle. And I think that could be like a good, easy button for Duke within their offense, which I think they're going to need to find quickly as far as the half court goes.
Yeah, sure. I think how Duke is going to cater to sort of to the strengths of Cayden Boozer and just hide his flaws a little bit is that they have two of the best bigs in terms of feel. We mentioned Cam Boozer, but Patrick Ngongba as well is like an insane passer for his size. So you can just run him on backdoor cuts and etc. And to look to make him as a playmaker in secondary actions, for example, as well.
Yeah, it was some really fun stuff in that exhibition, like some high-low actions. You saw Pat slip a screen when he saw that there was a direction, like a sort of angle to get to the rim. I want to ask you guys, as we talk about how these guys could move around the draft boards, Abdel's second question, which was, who do we think could be like the biggest risers or fallers by the end of the season from current consensus? My guys that I would look at, I think Hans Steinbeck is going to be really universally recognized. Avi must have known that I want to talk about him because he put out a tweet, and he was basically saying that, this is the highest PER in his league, BBL. He led them at 19 years old, 65 true shooting percentage, 16 offensive rebound, 50% free throw rate, and he posted a positive assist to turnover ratio. So I think he's going to pretty much dominate over at Washington. I think that he's to the point I talked about with Paul. Like, I think he'll outtouch some of the verticality issues. He just has outlier ability to snag rebounds, but also finish shots that most people aren't able to. So I think on Tankathon, he's at 27. I personally have a top 10 on sort of grade on him right now. I think that's where he'll be by the end of the season. And then some other guys, I think Sinak will have a bit of a fall just because some of the stuff that Sampson said. I think he said he doesn't see a huge role for them, although he did play a good amount in the exhibition. I just think that particular roster is kind of hard to have an instant impact in as a freshman. It's a good context for him to develop as a defender, but also think just because of some of his idiosyncrasies with the way he moves and the sort of he has a very thinner frame for the type of stuff you want to see from a guy that big. So I think you'll see a little bit of movement there where people sort of normalize. And then of course, some of the easier names, guys like Sturts or Ngongba or guys like that, I feel like they'll sort of naturally rise over the course of the cycle. But I would love to hear what you all think about some of the more volatile guys, or some of the guys you think that consensus will come to appreciate a little bit more throughout the cycle?
Yeah, I agree with you on Steinbach completely. Like, I think he's a top 10 level. I think I have him 8th on my board. So, I think the fun part of Steinbach is when you pair him with another big. Like, then his advantages become just so clear. I mean, basketball is a game of advantages, right? And if you can have an outlier rebounder playing at the 4 alongside another big, then it's just such a massive advantage, like we have seen with the Houston Rockets playing double bigs as well, and with the and with what we've seen in the preseason, I think, and it definitely seems like Washington is going to try and tap into these 2 big lineups pretty heavily. I think he's going to be just too big, too strong, too efficient to guard for most force, and I think he has he's almost impossible to move as well, like in terms of how strong he is. So I think he's going to be very, very much fine defensively, defending at the 4. I think he has the lateral mobility to step out to recover. Like, maybe he's not going to be like great defender on ball, but like in terms of help defensive actions and all that stuff, I think he's going to be very, very much fine, and he's like excellent at running in transition as well. So I think we're going to see some pretty insane statistical profile. We're going to see a pretty insane statistical profile with like 10 plus BPM from him, because like he's also a year older than most freshmen. He's a seasoned pro player as well, with a lot of reps in German top league. So there's just every avenue for him to dominate college basketball in his freshman year and to rise up the boards as well. And I think the other guy who's going to rise up the boards is Malachi Moreno. I think he's like there's no Jonathan Givony at ESPN, so it's harder to gauge the overall consensus among the NBA teams. But when I looked at the Bleacher Report mock draft, I don't remember if he was even in the first round, and I have him as 7th best prospect on my big boards. It's just like one of the best rebounders in the class, one of the best shot blockers, and his passing has really popped in the preseason games as well.
Yeah, I have a question for both of y'all, because it sounds like both of you guys are. I'm also fairly high on Heinz Steinbach as well, and to a lesser degree, Malachi Moreno. But with Steinbach, what do you guys see his kind of offensive value at being a guy that's slightly undersized for a 5, and isn't the most vertically dynamic, but has never had like significant issues finishing? But I'm kind of curious as to, because that's kind of the dominance has been so consistent. He's been so statistically productive at every stop. I'm kind of wondering what is the limiting factor for him, if he weren't to end up the season the top 7, 8, 9, whatever it may be, ranked prospect. So I was wondering how you guys saw the offense manifesting in the pros.
I think the most immediate value he's going to bring on any NBA team is by offensive rebounding. That is like, his offensive rebounding rates are pretty insane. He's going to contribute to extra possessions like pretty much straight away when he steps on the NBA floor. I think his shooting is improving as well.
I think he'll shoot eventually.
Yeah. I think he will eventually shoot. He'll never be a high volume shooter, but he's not going to be someone who you can leave open. And his passing as well. Like, I think he's a decent playmaker from the short roll. He's not the most vertical finisher. He's not probably in Ryan Kalkbrenner talks or anything like that, but I think he's capable. And I think because of his massive frame and the physical advantages he has over most forwards, he's just gonna go to the line a lot, I think, as well.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think to your point about like the free throw percentage, I mean, he didn't shoot it incredibly well like last year. I think he shot like 66% or something like that. but then I thought that there was a level of I don't know if it's a jump necessarily, but just like I believe in the touch so much at the rim, and then he shot like 77% in FIBA. Of course, small sample, but he's also getting to the line 5 times, and he's killing them on the offensive glass. And so I see the ability for someone like him who has some semblance of feel as potentially as a short roller, great offensive rebounder, and then potentially someone who can even maybe stretch the floor to some extent, and then also give you that positive value from the free throw line. I just really value guys who can win the possession battle, but also like not bleed value at the free throw line, and that's where I see it. Kind of like, I don't want to say Şengün because Şengün is so anomalous, but more so in the ability to like kill teams on the glass, but also just convert at the free throw line. I think there's not a lot of intersections of that like that in the league. You know, like even guys like the best free throw shooters are usually bad offensive rebounders. So if you have the ability or the potential to get to that level, I think that's a really special player.
Definitely. So another big one of my kind of guys I see rising throughout the process is Ademara. 7'3" big from Michigan guy I'm pretty high on. I'm high on that entire team in general, but I just think what Dusty May's done with big men in the past, and with even Flag Golden last year kind of working his way. I think he's on the Heat right now. I think he's on the two-way with the Heat.
Yeah, he is.
At the moment. But Mara is just such a massive talent, obviously going to be playing with Jax Lindenberg. I just think the synergy between those two, even Mara and Maresh Johnson, who's not a prospect, but maybe eventually, I think they're one of my I don't think it's a hot take. They're one of my title favorites. I think Mara's going to be a major beneficiary for playing in a team with just a lot more spacing, not a crazy amount of spacing, but UCLA was near bottom of the country in 3-point rate, near bottom of the country in assist rate. I think that'll kind of, being in a different situation will be a boon towards Mara's efficiency. And you just don't, guys that size, a legitimate 7'3", guys that size with even a modicum of mobility, which he has more than. He's like a fairly mobile player, fairly athletic player. And then with his feel on top of that, there's just such a high floor. And something, it's pretty obvious, but something I've just come to grow to value a lot more with bigs, or I've just kind of like honed down my evaluative process with big men. It just comes down to size, rebounding, and feel. I think are definitely the three biggest traits or boxes I look to check. And then another returner that I'm pretty high on is Anthony Robinson, lead guard from Missouri. He's about 6'3", enlisted, 6'7" wingspan, 6'8" wingspan. Was at 70 free throw rate this past season for Missouri. Just like any advanced stat, he's going to be a darling in because he got to the line a ton. He didn't turn the ball over really, and then produced steals at a pretty ridiculous rate. And I think this year is just going to be trimming a lot of the fat from his game as far as fouling less, just being more of a consistent defender on a possession by possession basis, and then just shooting. He was at 3 threes per 100 this past season. I think he's well within reason. His pre-NCAA production, he had a pretty stellar 3-point rate. I think once he's more heavily featured, once he gets back to that space, he'll just be have a more well-rounded offensive profile. And preseason, I'm going to have him lottery. I think like in my lottery, whenever I drop my board either Sunday or Monday, and then this guard class I think is pretty special. I think it's like one of the better guard classes we've had in the past couple of years, and I think he's a big reason why he'd probably be my third guard right now.
Yeah, those are great names. I want to transition a little bit before we come back to the overall question about the bigs to Connor Eastwood. He's a Substack subscriber. Shout out Connor. He has a question that I think that a lot of people are sort of pondering about Cayden Boozer, and he asked, how concerned are you about the impact of the athleticism / speed at the next level for Cayden Boozer, considering he isn't the greatest athlete? So I think that the big reason why this is such a big concern for Cam is that there's a sort of I guess like an implicit sort of expectation from guys that are taking the top 3 that they need to be primary number 1 options. And I personally feel like Cam can do that. But I think that where the most valid concerns about his ability to create offense is sort of creating from a standstill. I think that there are some sort of, not red flags, but just more so, I guess, weaknesses for him where he's attacking someone who's usually a little bit quicker than him laterally. Like even on that midi pull-up that he hit at the end of the first half in that exhibition game, I don't think that was the best process-wise. Like he wasn't really able to generate separation. But at the same time, he's incredibly strong. He has amazing touch. What is he, like 80+% from the free throw line, or like 400+ attempts, something like that, right? So like when you have that level of touch and you have that level of touch indicators, and I'm assuming he'll get the 3-point rate up as well. I'm not sure how much I care that he he can't reliably create from a speed perspective or from those driving angles if it's not attacking a weak side or closeout, or if it's not coming out of a screen or a handoff, because I think that he's strong enough and skilled enough to transcend that. It's sort of my viewpoint of it. I'm curious on what y'all think.
I think that if you put Cameron Boozer in a situation where he has to create a lot from standstill situations, I think you're using him wrong. That's that's the first thing. And I think that like overall his just strength and how big he is already for his size, for his age, and his just like overall physique and low center of gravity, I think caters well to him, to his handle, eventually improving to a point where he's at least capable and in that area. And his shot may not be the prettiest, but it works. So I think he has like enough counters to offset at least some part of those concerns.
Yeah, I think Cam's just such an interesting kind of distillation of how so many people, whether it be like basketball analysts or fans, just kind of perceive athleticism. Because Cam, I think he's going to play the wing eventually. If not this season, he'll be handling the ball a good bit. He's always rebounded at a ridiculous clip. He's finished it at a ridiculous clip. And I mean, he's not lacking for a lot of vertical athleticism, especially for the role I think he'll eventually play on the wing. I mean, he has a healthy amount of dunks in his pre-NCAA sample. And I think, what do y'all expect if you were to kind of handicap Cam's free throw rate? Would you expect it to be over, under, 45?
It's a good question.
That's a great line, because I feel like I almost instinctually want to say like 40%. I just feel like he's going to be huge on the glass, but I could also see it trending like 47. What you think, Paul?
I kind of wanted to look up how Duke played last season, and like one of the things that I noticed is that they actually kind of suppressed their free throw rate. So so that context may not be very positive to his in terms of generating free throw attempts for him. I would expect to land it somewhere around 40%. I would say, if I had to just like give a quick and highly uneducated guess.
No, I mean, and I think looking at it via through the lens of what Duke had done in the past, and it's one of the only teams that's had a lot of analogs to how they're probably going to use Cam Booz as far as jumbo type creators, with whether it be Paolo, who I know Shire wasn't the head coach at that time, but he was. If you look like their play type breakdown, he was kind of ghostwriting their playbook at that stage, and then obviously with Coop this past season, and Kyle Filipowski also, that was the last time Duke had really leaned into post-ups. And I think they're going to be so starved for half-court creation, they're going to allow Cam to post up a good bit. And obviously he's going to be running a little bit of pick-and-roll actions. I think he's going to be over that just because he's so strong. And I think you look at a game like the Tennessee one, for example, he was 7 for 20 from the field, if I recall. It wasn't like a very efficient game for him, but he still managed to get near 30 points. He was 9 from 11 from the line. And I think he's just going to be he's so good playing off 2 feet. He has such incredible balance. He's able to compensate for not having that first step burst so well that I think he'll just manage, just via patience and footwork, manage to get to that 50% free throw rate, which at that point, off a similar play type diet would be higher than Flag was able to do, higher than Paolo or Flip were able to do. So I don't know. I think he's a more than capable athlete. He's going to rebound like crazy. It's just not. It's just not the sexiest, it's not going to be like Zion or anything like that.
Yeah. I feel like if we're at a 50% free throw rate, then we're talking about one of the greatest prospects ever. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. I think he's going to, any of those statistical thresholds that a lot of those like previous, whether it be Duke prospects or any blue chip prospect we looked at, I think Cam's going to blow through those. Like even you look at people like first round picks with stellar. I mean, Chet had an incredible statistical resume coming in the NBA, and I think Cam's going to be right in that territory.
Yeah, and if we're talking about his athleticism, I think that for a 4, he has very decent stock rates as well. Like he can block shots. He's not the greatest in that aspect in the incoming class, but he can block shots as well. So I think think I'm not overly concerned on the defensive end as well, because like, first of all, you're not drafting Cayden Boozer to be a defensive enforcer.
Right.
And second of all, I think his primary value on defense comes from him just being a low center of gravity player who has some switchability and who mainly excels at keeping attackers from getting to their spots. Like, he moves well laterally. His footwork is good, just not just on offense but on defense as well.
Yeah, and he closes out possessions. I think, especially looking at Cam through being a wing or at wing at the next level, he's going to be one of the better wing rebounders in the league, almost immediately, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's one. I think that was one of the questions about whether Cayden Boozer can play center at the next level, and I'm personally not thrilled with that idea at all. I think there's going to be some situations where he can be valuable at the 5, but I'm just basically against any sort of setups which would negate his rebounding advantages. Because like, the plus value he brings as a defensive rebounder, plus his ability to throw insane outlet passes and grab and go situations, it's just like, you just absolutely have to maximize that.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I don't see any reason. I think he could maybe like his spot minutes. Like, I think he's refined enough positionally. I think that he's capable of like navigating that particular scenario. But to your point, there's no better advantage that I think he provides on the court to end the possession and then immediately translate that into a very high value offensive possession. Like, I think, again, to reference Finn's pod again, I think you all referenced that his transition frequency, his AAU teams always had insanely high transition frequency, and so much of that is his ability to end the possession and then immediately convert it to an offensive possession. So, I want to ask a question from Matt Powers at Draft Pow. He said, which prospect shot do you believe in the most, despite poor percentages historically? Curious to hear what y'all think.
I think of the high-end guys, I'm pretty high on relatively most of the lottery, like one-and-done caliber guys, like the wings shot projections. Koa Pizza guy that I know doesn't have the best free throw touch and has like actually a pretty paltry free throw rate, but he's always shot really well on pull-up twos. I think with Koa especially, I think this past U19 World Cup may have not been the most reflective of his offensive ability, because he was, but I mean, it's also, you could use it as, evidence that the offense is going to be a struggle for him early on. But with Koa, he was used almost exclusively as a play finisher, like a pick and roll man, which isn't necessarily his role. He's 6'7", just a hair under 6'8". He's just not going to be an effective role man. And then he's coming off a broken hand in his high school season as well. So I think that was comfortably the worst he shot from. He was like near 50% from the line in that setting. And I think that's the worst co-ed shot from the line in any extended period. And for a guy that kind of had incremental improvements throughout his high school career, I just don't think he just forgot to shoot free throws. I think once he comes back 100% from that injury, he'll be a more effective spacer. And then Caleb Wilson, I know, is a guy,
that's
again.
what I was going to say.
Yeah. I just, again, with these wing projections, I remember, and even like a lot of people that do draft content have access to the pre-NCAA stuff. And you look at a lot of these wings, and even wings that end up being kind of styled as shooters, guys like Taylor Hendricks or even Brandon Miller, they were sub 70% free throw guys, like, at least in their, final AAU seasons, and ended up being, especially in Miller's case, like really impressive shooters. I think Wilson, he has a really nice like pull up 2 volume dating back to AAU. You just watch him play. He's comfortable on the ball. He's coordinated. I don't think there's anything, devastatingly wrong with his mechanics or unfixable in his mechanics. I kind of expect him to eventually shoot. It may not be this season. It may be another kind of underwhelming, shooting season from him at UNC. But I think those two guys will. I'm more favorable review of their shooting projection.
I really want to buy Jaden Quaid's shot.
Yeah.
If he could add a reliable, consistent shot, even on low volume, I think that would be like, if you had to close out on him, I think that just completely changes his offensive projection at the next level. And he was poor last year shooting from three, but just like generally the offensive context at ASU was just like so nasty and just like such a difficult environment for him to be efficient on offense that I think he was able to generate decent volume. Like this is the thing. Like he had some real confidence in his shot. It's just that the shots he was taking were difficult, and a lot of them were just like forced by just like this poor setup offensively at the Arizona State University. So I think this year at Kentucky, hopefully he comes back fully healthy. It's going to provide a much clearer projection of how he could look at the next level. Like, for example, playing alongside other fives like Brandon Garrison or Malachi Moreno. So like if he could, for example, add this, be a consistent shooter as a trailer, I think that changes the game completely for him, because like his low center of gravity and handle, I think caters well to him being a good closeout attacker. And I think overall, he's probably a bit better passer than he's given credit for, because like a lot of assists that he made last year were like really self-created. It wasn't like something that just came to him in the flow of the offense. Like he had to just put the ball on the floor and create himself. I think and when you like contextualize all of his production offensive production at ASU last season, and the fact that he was just 17 years old, like I think he may be a better offensive prospect than people than many people think, like especially if he comes back healthy. And there's another name that I wanted to throw out that I really hope is going to develop a shot, like maybe not this year, but over the longer term. It's Sebastian Williams Adams from Auburn.
My God,
I think that he's an excellent player outside of the shooting. Like he is one of the more fun, underrated incoming freshmen.
Yeah, he hit a couple threes in their most recent exhibition versus Memphis, and was a guy that I profiled during his last season of AAU. I just thought like the combination of like the ball handling and the feel, it being huge for a power forward. I mean, 6'8", 6-7 foot wingspan. And then even in AAU, he started off, I think the first two sessions, he was near 50% from the line, finished just a hair under 70%. If he shoots in a meaningful way this season, even, or just shows significant progress in that respect, I think he could be the guy. He'd be one of my bets outside of the RSCI top 50 to work his way into draft conversations. Or even if it's not this year, a guy like LeBaron Philon, or has the same trajectory as LeBaron Philon, where we look at Sebastian and think, okay, maybe not now, but 2027, he could be a real prospect.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned Philon, because he's someone that I have hope for as a shooter as well. So in the minutes he played without Mark Sears, Alabama's offense was insane. I think they had like a 128, 129 offensive rating. His individual efficiency wasn't great, but I think he may be one of those players that sort of just needs a bit of a touch, or needs maybe a little bit stronger of an on-ball sort of shooter versus an off-ball shooter. And I think that he took like 500, 600 free throw attempts in his overall like high school sample, and he shot 78, 79%. I think that he's better than what he put like statistically and on tape last year offensively. I think that he still has a lot of the ancillary skills that keep me invested otherwise. So like even if he doesn't become this incredible shooter, or even like someone who can come off a pick and roll and pull up off the dribble, I feel like he's going to bring enough value to where he'll be a good enough free throw shooter, a good enough finisher, despite the frame, that it won't be too big of an issue. And then the other guy, when you mentioned Quaintance, I was looking into Aaron Gordon, because Aaron Gordon shot like 44% from the free throw line, very similar to Cayden. He took like 33s, and he was one of the very few freshmen who shot below 50% and got drafted. Like all these other guys went back to school, Herb Jones, Terrence Mann, all these other guys who shot awful percentages and ended up getting drafted. So I think that I have hope for Quaintance, not just because he's returning, but because of the other things that he showed, like to your point, Paul, like the type of shots he was taking, his overall ability to perceive the court, how quickly he's progressing at his age. And then just in general, I don't even think you need a ton of like offensive development for him to be an incredibly awesome player, just because he's that good defensively. And this kind of goes into one of the questions from my guy, Tiago, another Substack subscriber. Thank you again, my man. But he said, who would you take at 4? And he's saying not necessarily for the Hawks, sort of like, because of course this class has like a consensus top 3. I think that those of us who are here, we probably have Cayden like somewhere close to that top 3. Me personally, I have him above of AJ just because I believe in what he could grow into offensively, and I buy the defense so much. So I think for me, like my 4th best prospect, even though there's tiers and those are a little bit more important, like I think it'd be AJ for me. Who do you all have in sort of like that? That's like maybe like a one step or one development away from like stepping, at least challenging the top 3, because I think those will be the perceived top 3 for, I think, for the majority of the cycle.
Man, I was over the summer. I was really close to putting Jaden Quaidens over AJ DeBonce as well.
Yeah,
I didn't go there because of the injury mainly. But yeah, Quaidens is pretty firmly in the same tier as AJ DeBonce for me, and he's like pretty comfortably the 4th best prospect at this point for me. Like, I don't have really anyone who's like who could like reasonably challenge him at the 4 spot at this point. Like,
Yeah.
I think we have talked. I have talked about a lot of the arguments that why I think he's like, we didn't talk about the defense, but I think we all know that he's like really one of the better defensive prospects to come around in the last like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, Quaidens would definitely be in that range for me. And again, it just comes down to the injury coming off a torn ACL. I know a lot of Kentucky fans have referred to their exhibitions. We're missing X amount of starters, including Quaidens, and it might not even be Christmas by the time. It might be past Christmas by the time he's starting games for Kentucky. So it's going to take a little bit of time on that front. And I think the 4 spot in this draft is because there is probably, a firm tier with the big 3, and some people put Quaidens in that mix as well. So 4 has kind of been difficult for me. I've ran through a cycle of a couple guys we've already mentioned, but Bennett Sturtz, I think just if we're judging off the data, the information we have currently, there's no reason he shouldn't be, in my opinion, in that conversation. I mean, the floor raising season he had this past year, even playing mid-major level competition, it was, I mean, it was one of the best of at least like Bartorvik era. If you were to say like, 2008 to now, the past nearly 20 years, the season Sturtz had was pretty ridiculous. I mean, nothing on that great team, or stylistically, you were to look at the play type distribution, all that thing, nothing indicates a team that was like, had such a crazy X's and O's edge or a talent edge to produce at the level they did, be a near top 50 offense. It was really just Sturtz creating everything in the half court, whether it be as a playmaker, a scorer, and improved as the season went on. And for a guy to have, less than 40% of his threes were assisted. And I think that may be one of the more glaring things at this stage. Like, all right, is he gonna shoot like that? And I think, that's unreasonable even for like a high volume ball handler in the NBA to, create that much on their own. So I think it's massive asterisk next to JQ because of the injury, but I think right now I'd probably open the season with Sturtz at 4.
Yeah, and someone I have really grown on in the last few weeks is Caleb Wilson as well. I think I have him at 5. There are questions about how he scores in half court, and his like just overall style of play, how he approaches half court basketball, but like just overall the defensive chaos that he creates is just like something special. I think it's definitely worthy to at least be in that conversation as well.
Yeah. I think Wilson's offense it's probably going to be ugly, especially early on, especially considering the history that UNC's had recently, and the backcourt talent they have this year is probably the worst that they have had in the Hubert Davis era. But honestly, I think Caleb's shown in the past, like he can be on ball, he can run pick and roll, maybe not the most effectively, but just even having the coordination and the feel to do that in like a high volume in AAU, I think he'll tread water fine offensively in college. And they've always played at a pretty good pace. He's going to be a monster in transition. He's already one of the best transition players in the class, and he'll get garbage man buckets. He'll get putbacks, offensive rebounds. I'm really curious to see how his season takes shape, because it's probably one of the more volatile situations amongst the top, 10 prospects, or what would be considered the 10 prospects right now. But yeah, I think Caleb definitely deserves. He's in that inner circle for me, in that next year below the big 3/4 with JQ.
Yeah, I think the lack of guard creation at UNC may force him into a sort of a bigger role creatively than he's supposed to be. So that's probably thanks to his true shooting percentages as well, and maybe rim percentages as well. But
he's never finished well, which is concerning.
Yeah. But like just the passing feel as well is just like off the charts with him. Like he's able to deliver such like advanced reads. Like he's a super fun player for me.
Yeah.
He's the wing that I'm definitely highest on outside of AJ. I'd say for sure. Like, I think Koa would be right there with me. I think I'm chilling a little bit on Noah, or not Noah, but Amen. I'm Nate Amen. I'm just not. Maybe I'm a little bit traumatized, but guys who have some, like the it should seem like a pretty seamless value proposition for someone like him, right? He's a nuclear shooter. But the more I watch him, and it just feels like the separation, the struggles against physicality, of course, the actual half-court rim finishing, the lack of ability to get to the rim in general, and then he doesn't really give you much outside of that. So that's one I'll be watching very closely. I think that he could have a pretty strong offensive season, but I think the stuff that he does outside of the actual shooting will be pretty paramount, because he is that level of shooter that if he takes that next step as a rebounder, as a defensive playmaker, or even as a playmaker overall, then I think that he could get in that conversation as well. I want to go back to sort of what we were all touching on. Like, Ahmed, you talked about Mara, Paul and I talked about Hans, but we have a question from Cheem at Lord_Chima. He said, what's your philosophy on draftable bigs? And then we had another question from Sancho, who said, basically talking about how we've had a trend of these senior traditional centers being drafted. We had Zach Edey and Kalkbrenner, who were drafted, and then like were immediately inserted into the opening day lineup. And that's become sort of like an edge for some teams, where you're able to take these bigger guys who have proven themselves for a longer substantial amount of time and then immediately introduce them into your rotation. Because I do think in general, the big man has become more valued in today's NBA. Like, there was a period of time where it's very devalued. You had guys like pretty much teams are running putting all their resources into wings and guards and then running minimum contracts as bigs. Like, I think the Warriors are a great example, but there's become a bit more of a shift like in it. And we've kind of flowed back into this idea of valuing the big man. So if we get 3 years of this trend, which center that will run out of college eligibility this year would be your pick to be an opening day starter? Is the first question. And then overall, like, what's your philosophy on draftable bigs?
Oh, the opening day starter one is that runs out of eligibility, so it has to be a senior. It's pretty interesting. I mean, probably Nate Biddle would be on the short list for me, even though I have a ton of questions on him and his NBA translation. I'm probably lower on Biddle relative to a lot of draft Twitter people, because I just have some concerns about the finishing, and obviously the health has been an issue with him in the past. And sorry, what was the other question again?
Yeah, like your overall philosophy about like what makes a draftable
pick. So I think, and this is something I've done a lot of digging into recently, because there's been kind of a proliferation of just bigs have been, a big talk amongst draft Twitter people. And obviously, as people in general, fans in general, just become more, statistically inclined and fluent in like all these different impact metrics. Bigs typically seem to drastically outperform at least what their perception is based off of these impact metrics. But I think as far as prospects, first and foremost is just like feel. Like, there needs to be just like a baseline feel. I understand and I've done the same thing in the past. It's so often easy to just attribute, an athletic profile to a big just having success in the league. Like, oh, he's a rim runner. That's an easily slottable role and fit. He's going to be able to, affect games well. And that's just not the case. I think there needs to be just an amount of feel. And you can obviously, there's a bunch of ways to judge that statistically or just by watching the games. I think feel is pretty easy to differentiate between bigs. And then size, I actually don't know. Are you also a Hawks fan, Sheed? I assume so.
No, actually, no.
Oh, okay.
I'm just a sucker for that one game that
it was a legendary game, man.
Yeah.
But I know David is definitely something he's aware of the pitfall that can be the undersized big. I've been and he's developed well enough, but someone like Onyeka, watching his kind of struggles, and there have been some contributing factors, but I think on the court, the size has definitely been somewhat limiting as far as his defensive ability and just how, versatile he is amongst these different lineup configurations. But like, size is a big one. And then finishing, there's like if there is kind of a golden number that I look for bigs hitting, it's 70% at the rim. It's just fairly simple, but I think it's any big that's had, you know, a longer tenure in the league is more or less hit that. And if they haven't, they've honestly just, it's kind of an outlier case. Like there's something along their developmental trajectory was made as such that they could contribute in other ways. Maybe it's a stretch big, or maybe they were just, you know, poorly deployed in college. But yeah, 70% of the rim, assisted turnovers, one, and then size.
So yeah, if I had to answer that question in these very narrow terms about the next Kalkbrenner or Edey that's running out of college eligibility, like the answer is Nate Biddle, but like the real answer is that I don't think that there's an next Ryan Kalkbrenner among the bigs that are running out of eligibility. Like I think Biddle is good. I think he's someone that I may end up having a first-round grade on, but like he's not as seamless a transition as Ryan Kalkbrenner is. As we're recording this, Ryan Kalkbrenner has made 27 out of 30 field goals. Like there's no way that Nate Biddle comes in into the NBA next season and touches that or anything close to that. So if we were to just like open up this question a little bit about the next EDR Kalkbrenner, then the answer I think is Adai Mara, someone who we have talked about already. Yeah. And I think the Michigan context is just like going to provide as well a much clearer pathway and the potential role. I think Ahmed mentioned that he looks for at least 70+% in terms of making shots at the rim. Mara was close to that, but the thing with him was that he was used heavily in the post as well. Like I think like 39% of his shots came from the post last season. So he had a heavy diet of unassisted shots at the rim last season, and he's just like such a great dunker. So if you were to like scale down the role for him offensively in terms of scoring the ball into more of a play finisher, he just clears that 70% easily. I think next season, you just give him less post touches and use him more as a finisher, like in the mold that Ryan Kalkbrenner is used in the NBA right now. And with regards to philosophy, I think rim finishing is pretty much a must for me. And I think in general the main pillar upon which my philosophy on drafting big stands is that that the center is the most important position defensive in basketball. So like if you look at the statistics, good perimeter defense is great, but like if there's like a short amount of games and the short stretch of games, like for example with the Chicago Bulls this season, where the opposing teams are shooting like sub 30%, it's most likely not good defense, but just variation working in your favor.
Right.
And with rim defense and bigs, I think there's just the margin of error is like just much bigger. Like if you have a great rim deterrent, if you have someone who can contest shots as well, like it's just like such a massive advantage for you as well. And just in general, the drop defense big coming back into fashion instead of these switchable mobile bigs. And the second thing that like Ahmed mentioned as well is the feel. Like if you, for example, can be a good screen setter function in DHO situations, if you can draw pressure on if you can drop people on the ball and then release that pressure with your passing, I think that this is probably the clearest pathway for most bigs who end up being productive NBA players. Like I'm not talking outliers like Nikola Jokic, but like your average NBA big. This is most likely going to be the most plausible pathway for you into rotational minutes.
Yeah, and I feel like I agree, like on all counts with Mara. I think he's the closest approximations is like what Kalkbrenner and Edey brought within their first rookie season, or like what they're doing right now. But another guy that comes to mind for me is like Vesar. He's not the same archetype big Like he's obviously not like a massive hulking guy. He didn't shoot it incredibly well at the rim, but I'm really big on his offensive skill set. I think that he can really pass the hell out the ball. If they're in, when I talk about like my overall big man philosophy, like I think the best example of like a current player that like embodies what I'd want from a big offensively is like Yang Hansen. Like I love that he's able to make all these different types of passes, but it's his fuel as a screener where he's going into a handoff and then he turns into a butt screen and then he's able to Gortat screen and then he's like he flows seamlessly between actions. He can facilitate from the top of the key. He can facilitate from the post. He has every passing angle and sort of I guess anything in his bag is sort of like possible. He sees reads that aren't necessarily available. And then if I was going to take it defensively, I think like someone like Onyeka, like to Ahmed's point, has a lot of deficiencies as a switchable or saw like a more mobile big. So I don't think I go quite that direction, but I think more so someone like Derek Lively is like my ideal like sort of defensive big, and then Lively also has a lot of those offensive traits that Hanson Yang has in terms of the short roll passing and the feel as a screener. But I think for me, like I really, really value screening, and this is a lesson I learned with Alex Sarr. Like I felt like Alex Sarr was going to be maximized in Atlanta's context playing next to Trae Young, but and I was aware of this. Like I even I spoke directly about his aversion to doing like big man things, whether it's rebounding or screening. But I think I kind of like underestimated just how important it is and how important it is to have that early too, because it's just sort of indicative of how that big man approaches his overall role. And so I think I think Sarr's gone better at that. I think he's gotten better at playing as a big, as rolling and finishing through contact, whatever it may be. But I'd much rather have that than concrete. Like know that this guy's a great screener. He can function at the short roll. He can do all these certain things. So I really value screening. I value short roll passing. I value the ability to facilitate. I think playmaking. I think front court playmaking is the biggest source of edge in the NBA today. I think it's a continuous factor across like championship teams. You got to have some semblance of front court playmaking because it's a release valve for everyone else, but it's also just a really easy way to create shots. Like there's no better way, in my opinion, to rescue a possession. Let's say like you get to a pick and roll and then like, it gets stymied, action gets denied. Like it's so easy to flow back into, especially if you have a pick and pop big like someone like Kristaps, where you can now flow directly into that handoff and I can cut off. Now you got split cuts, you got down screens, you got all these different actions that you can get and unlock by having a front court playmaking big. And so it's a big reason why I like Vesar a lot, why I like Mara. While even Moreno is pretty high for me in the Gungba, like these are the types of bigs that I love. And I think that to Ahmed's point, this is a really interesting guard class. I think the bigs are kind of a little bit underrated too. Like I know like a lot of people who are putting out draft boards have a ton of bigs in the top like 15 or so, but I think that those guys will like really prove their placements because I just think the NBA is, again, like that pendulum is swinging back towards big men being valued again.
Yeah, definitely. Can I ask you something though, David, as someone that covers it or looks at the game, I don't want to say primarily, but largely through the Hawks and the NBA, how important do you think it is like synchronizing your big skill set with your guard skill set? Because I mean, just like as a fan, watching the Hawks and watching Trae, I feel like that's something that since, Prime Clint, which I guess wasn't too long ago, but since Capella, it's been kind of it's been a little troubling, like, or at least the Hawks trying to find a big that aligned with and maximized Trae.
I think it's pretty vital. It's why I felt like the Edey Morant pairing was like seamless. I was like, this is just supercharged Steven Adams. It's gonna be awesome. And like that's like.
So were you someone that wanted to see? Sorry to cut you off, but were you someone that wanted to see Edey, like when the Hawks had the number one pick? Were you someone that wanted to see whether it be Edey or Clingan get drafted?
It was more so for me. I was thinking about Clingan, more than Edey, just because I thought that. I bought Clingan's passing a little bit more, but I was kind of like more so thinking wing with that pick because that was the biggest deficiency on the roster at that point. Like, Capella had started to deteriorate a little bit, but he wasn't completely falling off. And like I was still pretty high on Onyeka, and I am still pretty high on Onyeka, but I think that I've grown to just value big man production a little bit more because I think the delta between like a high end big and a low end big is like probably the biggest skill gap, I'd say. Like, I think the wings sort of delta has flatlined a little bit. Like there's like the replacement level of production you can get from a wing is a little bit more tenable than what you get from a big. And like, once you start playing Tony Bradley and, like James Wiseman, it's kind of fried. And so I think that if I would have redone, like if I was a Hawks GM and I had like where I sort of value in basketball now, I probably would have went Clingan, maybe. I think my only concern was like the minutes percentage, and that's the same issue. Like we'll have to see with Mara as well because he just hasn't been able to get on the court. I wanted to ask y'all as well. I'm pulling up the question again. There was a sorry, I'm pulling it up. Like sort of in general, like this is from Sky from the Substack. Shout out Sky. He's talking about, or they're talking about some commentary they hear about Quinn Snyder from fans is that there's like a very complex offensive system. It takes players a year to really understand it. And they're asking particularly like from the Hawks perspective, do we believe whether that's why they're contributing to a slow start? I want to kind of flip this a little bit and just talk about it from a more like draft perspective, or also just like a more like universal perspective. Like what prospects do we feel like are entering a system that's a little complex? And because like, for example, there was a question about like P2 and I'm forgetting the freshman's name.
Matt Abel.
Yeah, Matt Abel. And so I feel like that system isn't like I've watched some of their open practice stuff and it seems like pretty read and react, doesn't seem too complicated. But I'm curious if there's any prospects that you feel like are heading into a complex offensive system, and if there's someone that we should like give them a little bit of grace as they adjust to their new concepts.
A complex system specifically. I mean, I'm definitely interested to see what AJ looks like. I mean, BYU is about as close to an analog or a one-to-one comparison of an NBA system as you can get.
Yep.
And you'll see watching them last year, the kind of actions they had Yegor Demin running, those were, I mean, NBA kind of ball screen sets. But with AJ, it'll just be, I'm definitely curious to see what the playmaking volume looks like how many decisions he's making, what that balance between, the play finishing and the facilitating or initiating is for him. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was somewhat rough because, I mean, those were like you touched on with Quinn Snyder and just NBA sets in general. They're going to be a little bit more complex. The decision-making needs to be more finely tuned. So maybe AJ would be one early on. I know, honestly, it applies kind of to the entire top three, Peterson and Boozer, because DP's going into a system that had been primarily like a motion offense, and seeing him like they were using him running like in the exhibition. He ran off screens. He shot a couple movement threes. It seems like he's going to have a bunch of different deployments. Whereas in high school, I don't think I'd seen a player run more spread pick and roll than Darren Peterson. I mean, it was every single time off the court. He would slow down transition possessions just so he could get into a 1-5 ball screen. But so him, and then obviously with Boozer, he's gonna run pick and roll. He's gonna be initiating more than he ever has, which is not saying much, but there could definitely be some bumps in the road there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a difficult question about the complex offenses because like a lot of NBA teams, they sort of run similar concepts. I think there are there's a few teams that like for example, I read this question and I really wanted to go back to watch some of the Hawks half court possessions and how in terms of how they initiate offense. And like David will correct me if I'm wrong, but like I didn't see anything that's like out of the ordinary compared to other NBA teams. They would run like the same horn sets. They would run zooms. They would run 77 screens, away actions. Like for example, last night when Trae Young was out, they would use Kristaps Porzingis in the pinch post as well a lot. So it's maybe more about the role adjustment in the case of the Atlanta Hawks than the system complexity, and just like being able to make good decisions in those roles. And just like overall, I think that the most complex and the most difficult systems in the NBA may actually be the ones that are actually on paper are the simplest, and especially when we're talking about the Miami Heat, who have started the season with a vastly different offense, and it's been working for them. But it's sort of based, but a lot of it is based on just players being able to read and react. And in order to play that system efficiently, you have to have like all 5 players have to be high IQ. They have to be able to make quick decisions. They have to be able to not hold the ball for too long. And with the Heat, it has been working for them. And like the Indiana Pacers as well, their controlled chaos system. It's actually, I think, pretty difficult to execute and to make good decisions in that system. Indiana was helped by the fact that they had like this insane playmaker in Tyrese Halliburton, who had insane assist volumes on just incredibly low turnover numbers. So I think those systems may actually be the ones that are the most difficult to come in and produce immediately.
Yeah.
And with the Hawks, like, I don't know, maybe David has something to add, but I personally, I didn't see anything that's out of the ordinary.
Yeah, that I agree with that. There's not a ton of complexity in terms of relative to the rest of the league, but I think it's, to your point, more so about like guys shifting to new roles. The big shift that they've really done is just playing through KP more, so hunting mismatches, getting him in the pinch, in like that pinch area, which is above the free throw line extended, sort of like in that corner pocket, and running actions through him there. That's kind of like the biggest shift they've seen. I think it's more so about, to your point, like how are guys going to be making quick decisions? Because like Indiana, for example, everyone in their rotation had a whole time like under 1 second, which means that that ball is popping, and that's something that the Hawks want to replicate to an extent, but they don't have the like the centralized or even like the more like dispersed, I guess, idea of playmaking. Like it's especially when you're trying to oscillate between like, okay, here's Trae Young spread pick and roll. Now we're gonna get it to Jalen in the short roll. Now we're gonna play through KP. Like there's these different ways they want to attack offensively, and so it takes time for that to gel. I think people forget how, and this is something that applies to college prospects as well. Like you go from a context, to your point, Ahmed, like with someone like Darren Peterson, he's playing spread pick and roll the entirety of his career. Like he's get the ball in my hands, I'm going to operate. Now you have to figure out how to, not as you have the teammates around you who are a little bit more capable of creating offense for themselves, or you're working a different offensive system. I think the ability to be impactful in different contexts is also something I really pay attention to. And so for DP, like, can he continue to be capable off ball, which I think he absolutely should be able to, with like his shooting ability, but also what he can do off the catch with his explosion and his burst and his overall size, like stampeding off the catch. That should be big for him. And it's important to see how guys' efficiency stabilizes throughout those contexts as well. I think you have something to say, Ahmed, but I'm also curious, like the Matt Abel versus P2. That was from Hoops_G. He's an NC State alum, and so that's been a big debate for them. Me personally, just like real quick, I'm not big on Abel. I like P2 a lot more. P2 is Paul McNeil Jr. I don't have his pre-NCAA stuff, but what I've seen, what I was able to like scrounge up and like watch, I think he's much more capable as a self-creator. I like his size better than Abel. I think Abel settled a lot for mid-range jumpers. I didn't like what I saw in his pre-NCAA stats. I think he was like 36 or 37% from two in AAU. So I'm definitely leaning more on P2. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, McNeil, I think, hands down the most interesting guy for me to evaluate throughout this cycle because he's just a very like weird, bizarre player. I also agree with you. I prefer him to Abel more of a conventional 2-guard wing type. That I don't think he's the caliber shooter you necessarily need to be to alleviate some of the concerns I have with the downhill pressure and the
I'm getting some Keontae George with him, and it's scary.
Yeah, I don't even know. Keontae, I think, was even more dynamic downhill athlete than Abel. I don't know. I'll be curious to see how he develops. I think long term, I may even think he's the third or fourth best prospect on that NC State team. But regardless, with P2, just a crazy decision maker. He's like always been above 2 assist to turnover, like crazy processor for a wing/guard. And on the sample I have on 152 career free throws, he's 84%. Crazy 3-point attempt rate. I mean, he's 58% 3-point attempt rate, which is just wildly outlier for a guy his size at any level. But do y'all consider P2 a prospect this year? You think he'll end up declaring? If you had to project, not even like would he be on your board, but do you think he'll end up in the 2026 draft class?
He's on my board, but I'm not 100% sure
that's what's been difficult for me trying to put together a board.
It's when you're putting together these preseason boards, it's like it's about how much do you value a prospect versus how much do you think how big do you think a chance is that he's going to declare.
And Paul's just got the kind of game to where I think he's so unique that it may take a little bit, or at least for the NBA to feel comfortable enough, drafting him, or him feel comfortable enough leaving and have that stable draft position to look forward to. I don't know, because he's a guy, I think he had 7 half-court rim makes this past season.
Yeah,
but he has barely played, so
but as he's just never gotten to the line. He's never been like a high rim rate or free throw rate guy. He's just kind of the best decision maker, movement shooter combo that I've evaluated from the high school ranks. So
I'm
be an
super
interesting
intrigued by
try.
his pairing with Darian Williams. I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
like that's going to be super fun because like Darian Williams is like just an incredibly good player in the post for his position, who just combines that ability with a lot of passing. So I think it's going to draw a lot of attention, and McNeil is going to be an excellent release valve for all that pressure turn.
Yeah.
I'm and I know they didn't televise their exhibition, but like I was trying to dig as deep as I could because they said that apparently McNeil like was checked in for that final possession, which kind of makes me hopeful that he could be pretty well featured in the offense. Like when I watch the open practice videos, like it seems I don't think he's running with the first team, but
He
even
started
like I
that
love
game. Yeah.
he did okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love his shooting mechanics. Like his guide hand looks a little funky. Like it kind of like does this, but it's very repeatable, and he gets great elevation on his shot. It looked the same every time, every rep I've been able to see. I was curious, do you have his wingspan and do you have like his rebounding rates? Because it seems like he
So
rebounded relatively well.
yeah, I don't have his wingspan. He rebounded really well offensively. He's always rebounded well historically, like through the
Mm,
grassroots and at least this past season. It was kind of weird in that he had below a 10% defensive rebound, but near a 10% offensive rebound rate, which is a split you don't typically see. It's just most things he does are I don't think he can play the wing defensively. Really, like if despite the rebounding, he's probably going to measure like weigh in under 200 pounds. He's just like a very slight. I think that's why he didn't get many minutes this past season because he was so slight coming in.
yeah.
But with Paul, yeah, there's just a lot of redundancy in the skill sets on NC State between like all the wings, whether it be Abel, Terrence Arsenault, Darian Williams. So I'm interested to see how he fits in and what that shot profile ends up looking like because 14 threes per 100 this past season. It'll be interesting to track.
I don't want to eye test wingspans, but his arms look long.
Yeah, he blocked
Definitely,
Khan in the game they played this past season. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he's 6'6" with, 6'10", 6'11" wingspan, something like that. He looks pretty long for, wing.
I think a +5, +6 would really change how I feel about him, though. Like,
Yeah.
just because I think that he's so interesting otherwise. But to your point, like if even when like from the clips I was able to watch, like it seems like he got a lot of Z bounce, like getting his own boards, and I think that kind of speaks to the ability to, not just have a motor, but be able to like really like play reactively. So I don't know. I think he's really interesting, and I think I'll be following a lot of what NC State is doing in general. I think I want to wrap up with this last question. From Dicey at Dicey Got Hacked. He was curious about what's y'all's overall team building philosophies, like maybe a visual of what your perfect NBA team would look like, what we value more versus what we're fine sacrificing. I think this is a nice way to tie it all off, put a bow on it, sort of like how these prospects could potentially fit into the way that we would ideally construct an NBA team.
Yeah. So for me, it's I think I'm trending the way where I would rather have and we're trying to build like realistic rosters. So like we're not trying to build all-star teams, like something that you can just put together realistically with all the restrictions that you work with work as an NBA GM. So I think especially with the Indiana Pacers almost winning the NBA championship last season, like I gotta think that I'm going with a more balanced roster over like having one superstar dominate the ball and stuff like that. Like to me, it's about having as many good decision makers on the floor. Like we talked, like David mentioned, when you can have someone who makes great decisions at center, it's just like such a massive advantage, such a massive advantage, like in itself. I think I prioritize players who help win possession battle. So turnover reverse, they grab offensive rebounds. They have, like for example, good offensive rebounding rates relative to their position. Like for example, with the Houston Rockets, they are the number one offensive rating. Like it's obviously just 5 or 6 games, but like that was pretty surprising for me to see the Houston Rockets to be the number one offensive rating to start the NBA season, and it's mostly because they live at the line. Second, they win the rebounding battle, and the third, those are the main things for them. So So yeah, and defensively, I think yeah, for me, having a big that that's good in drop coverage, that's a good rim deterrent, who's good at setting screens and dribble handoff actions as well. Like that's paramount, and just having a lot of positional versatility, like as much as you can, and just like overall having a deep roster that's going to sustain an 82 game NBA season. That's becoming more and more important every season.
Right.
Yeah, so I echo a lot of the same sentiments on the team building side of things, or the team building philosophy. I think first and foremost, your team building philosophy should be entirely dependent on your number one guy. You're trying to forge an identity and trying to collect skill sets that are going to enhance, the number one guys, or just be complementary towards the number one guy's skill set, and then obviously can kind of cement over or paint over any of his deficiencies. So, and then just identifying what those skill sets would be. She's mentioned Houston a couple times, and they have a lot of guys, like they just double down on a strength, having all-time offensive rebounders like Steven Adams, and then you just include all that size and athleticism. Just that's a decisive advantage they're going to have over so many teams in that identity. And I think, the Pacers being able to kind of have one guy monopolize all the decision making, and then you remove so much playmaking burden from these guys that have been kind of, I don't want to say castaways, but guys like Obi Toppin and Aaron Nesmith who weren't able to find roles, but you turn them into just complete play finisher types, and they're able to kind of contribute in other areas. You find them kind of punching above what had previously been expected. So I think in my thinking, it's just identifying what guys, or at least team building wise, identifying what players are going to be worth, accommodating, obviously acquiring those, and then finding out which players afterwards, which secondary, tertiary, complementary guys are going to align with that skill set and complement it to the fullest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I think that.
And I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Ahmed said, is that one of the things that I would like NBA GMs to do more often is to be a little bit more bolder with their decisions with regards to their because like everyone seems to be obsessed with hitting on their draft picks and then maxing them out.
Yeah.
And that's not always the right decision, because like I sort of missed this this thinking of buy low and sell high. Like I don't think enough teams sell high enough. Like there are teams who buy high and who take swings, but most often those swings are already on like established. They take risks, but those risks are taken on like established guys. Like for example, stars, just adding additional pieces like
McNeil.
to finish off what you perceive to be this championship puzzle or something like that. So so one of the things that like I really miss is that I would like to see some GMs be bolder with their decisions, especially with regards to players who they have drafted and who are still on their rookie contracts. Because like I think that if a bunch of nerds on Twitter can see and differentiate an impactful player from an empty stat player, I think NBA GMs can do that as well. Like, and just
No, I agree with that, and I think to Ahmed's point too, like the way the Thunder plays dictated by Shai's ability to centralize all the decision making into him, but also the shot making, and so they can surround him with all these defensively oriented guys because he's that level of isolation shot creator. And even though he has his deficiencies as a front court playmaker, now you pair him with someone like Isaiah Hartenstein, who can sort of facilitate from delay actions and find Chet Holmgren on some of those angles that Shai isn't exactly proficient at. And so I think my overall philosophy in terms of building a team is, first and foremost, like I want like a strength creator, and I think that's like really been dictated by the Hawks not having that ever in the Trae Young era, but like having a guy who can use his strength to his advantage to generate advantages for others. Like I think I used to be pretty pessimistic about Julius Randle when I was like straight in fan mode and really hating on the Knicks, but I love Randle's skill set. I think if you fuse Randle and Siakam, you'd have like my ideal like strength creator that could also play on the open floor and like make good decisions. And like those types of guys I really, really value because their versatility. Siakam can play off the catch. He can scale up on ball. He can scale up off ball. He's a really interesting player. Someone that I think has been like a chameleon the entirety of his career. Started as a role player, then saw a lot of isolation reps once they ended up shipping guys out, and then came to Indiana, switched his play style again, and now he's at the highest on ball percentage of his career. And like these Pacers teams are like really bad. That's the reason they're 0-5, but that he's being overextended. But that's like kind of speaking to his ability to even scale up to that extent. And so I really value a guy like Siakam. I also would want like a strong pick and roll operator. It doesn't have to be a guard. Like, for example, Brandon Ingram, I don't think is the best at that particular case, but I like his wing playmaking ability. He can face it from the free throw line. That's the type of guy that I really value. He's bleeding a little bit defensive value, but he has long enough a wingspan. And if you can keep him engaged enough and not overtax him offensively, like I like that idea of a wing. And similar to you guys, I think what we spoke about with like bigs with feel, I think something I really value more and more is like vertical spacing, just because I think it adds an element to pick and roll operation that you can't really get even if you have a pick and pop big. And so I would definitely be looking for that as well. And overall, like my ethos is more so like versatility. Like I don't want to be locked into one play style at any point. I want to be able to have multiple. I want to have ideally a big who can, both bigs can pass, but maybe we go heavy drop coverage with one big, and then we're icing screens, or we're blitzing, or we're switching, or we're hedging with the other one. And so we can just throw different looks at offenses. And then on the other end as well, I don't want to be locked into just spread pick and roll. I want to be able to operate from the top of the key. I want to be able to dump it into the post. And so I think that the Hawks are pretty close to my ideal sort of team, but they're lacking a strength creator. They're lacking reliable half-court initiation outside of Trae Young. And then they're lacking like sort of overall 3-point gravity and decision-making from their wings. And so that's like those particular areas of things I would want to address if I was a GM, is that I was building out this Hawks team. And I think you kind of lock yourself into bleeding value defensively if Trae Young's going to be your guy. And I think he's transcended enough offensively with enough support that you could still get it done. But ideally, the guy you build around doesn't have those efficiencies. And I think that's why someone like Darren Peterson, Shai Gilgeous, theoretically, someone like Cade, even though he has a lot of turnover issues and he isn't the best defender, but like theoretically, those big playmakers are becoming so sought after. So I think that'd be my overall sort of vision for how I'd want to build out a team. But yeah.
And just one more thing I would like to add is that I would like for example, if I have my center rotation and I have this I really like what the Charlotte Hornets have done with their rotation and Kalkbrenner and Diabate, because they have one big who plays a sort of a rim deterrent drop roll, and then you have the second big who's a bit more mobile and complements the skill set of the other big. So I think that brings a ton of versatility and just being able to adjust to whatever the opposition is throwing at you, like having these backups who complement the skill set of your main guys. So, like for example, I really like the acquisition of Lonzo Ball by the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think, like for example, if we look at the regular season, maybe Ty Jerome was a better player for them, but when the playoffs come, I think his defense is just going to be a massive floor raiser for the Cleveland Cavaliers compared to what they have with Ty Jerome. I think he just complements what they have in Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell just way better than what Ty Jerome did.
Yeah, and I think discussing all this team building philosophy stuff, and especially on a Hawks podcast and before a season that could be very pivotal from a team building perspective, and especially through the draft with the Pelicans pick, I was wondering for David, which one of these guys you were just kind of discussing your ideal fit or ideal kind of team building foundation, and a lot of these guys at the top of the draft kind of touch on those in different areas. So I'm wondering if the Hawks were to get a top 3 pick, in what direction are you leaning, or who do you think would be, assuming Trae? I kind of think Trae will be in the long-term plans. You could tell me if I'm, otherwise, if you think otherwise, but which of these guys do you think would be best optimized with Trae?
Yeah, and I think for me, man, like it doesn't matter. I'm going Cayden Boozer, any team. I just kind of think like he's that type of talent. I think even for the Hawks, like it may like at first glance, maybe like, oh, he's duplicative with Jalen Johnson. But if he proves what I think he will, which is the touch is insane, and he potentially could even play as a 3, then I think you have a really awesome forward combo with guys who are both pretty physical, but can also like kickstart breaks, pushing the pace themselves, great passing from that position. And it reminded me that we actually got a question like today on the little mailbag I posted. Because from my perspective, I think it has to be Boozer, but like by no means would I not take DP or AJ if they were like on the board, say the Hawks at third or whatever. I think those guys also address positions of need. But we have a question from Jules, who said, who has a harder decision to make with draft implications involved? The Grizzlies with Ja, obviously a fractured relationship, or the Hawks with Trey, because both of these teams do own those pretty optimistically looking future picks. And so they could be, I think that people are looking at that as like a potential crossroads. I'm with you, Ahmed. I think that Trae Young is part of the plans going forward. And also, at no point in NBA history has there ever been an 18-year-old that immediately contributed to winning in terms of contention status. Like, of course, LeBron raises teams for Luka, Wemby, whatever it may be. But like, it would be foolish, in my opinion, to get that sort of a pick and then trade away a guy who's going to make that pick's life really easy. Like, I think Anthony Davis is kind of almost detrimental to Cooper Flag just because of how stacked that front court is and how static AD is as an offensive player in terms of his inability to play the five, unwillingness to play the five, and then the fact that he's just not shooting the ball, so he just isn't shooting well. So I think that particular case, I would have moved on from AD but I understand why they want to keep that contention window open, because Cooper Flag has this baseline of skills, and this roster was already built to contend, whatever it may be. But I think when I look at the Grizzlies and the Hawks, I don't know, the quote that came out from Ja was pretty bad. I don't know if you all had a chance to see it, but he's blaming Tomas for like not really having a lot of rhythm in the way he's playing. And I think Tomas is a fantastic coach. I love his sort of philosophies and what he's installed for them offensively. I think the harder decision is probably Memphis, because the Hawks would just take the pick, and I don't think they're thinking about moving on from Trey. I think because of Ja's lack of availability, some of the stuff he's had with the media, I think Memphis would contemplate it.
Yeah. And I think, especially in respects to Trey and just team building in general, there aren't really any sacrifices you need to make. Obviously, the defense is something that for the Hawks to reach a championship, to be a championship caliber team, that's something they're going to have to accommodate in a serious way, a serious matter personnel wise. But contractually, I just don't think Trey is going to be prohibitively expensive in the offseason.
Exactly.
I think his value has been so kind of suppressed across the league with just how Trey's been discussed. So I don't really think the Hawks are going to have to make many accommodations on that front. And then, at that point, it's just going to be BPA with wherever the Pelicans pick lands.
Yeah.
With Ja, it is, I mean, the Grizzlies have kind of spoken, right, where they think this team maxes out at, and kind of their actions, I feel like, communicate how they feel about Ja with their plan moving forward, with their team building moving forward. So I think it's tougher, because then they have to entirely reconstruct their identity, and they have a bunch of good complementary pieces, and they've drafted well in the past. But I mean, this pick would be, if they were to receive a high pick, that'd be what they're building this team around for the next 5-10 years.
I'd be shocked if there hasn't been any trade talks for Ja Morant. I mean, amongst the front office of the Memphis Grizzlies, like the situation is like really getting pretty damn ugly. And I think for the Hawks, it's I think they're better positioned in the sense that they are playing in the Eastern Conference, and some of the best number one picks in recent years, like not some, but essentially all of them, like Wemby, now Cooper Flag, they all went to the West. So I think there's just an easier pathway to contention for the Hawks than it is for the Memphis Grizzlies. And that's something that you probably have in mind while making this decision as well.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And guys, I really can't thank y'all enough. I was already like super excited for this draft. Of course, when Joe Dumars made that trade, like I still can't fathom that it happened, but I think it created an interest for me to get into the draft earlier. So I appreciate you all for facilitating this conversation and having it with me. I hope all my viewers enjoyed it as well. Yeah, and make sure, please let people know where to find y'all. Their information will be in the description as well. You can go ahead first, Ahmed.
Yeah, so follow me at Slip the Screen on Twitter. I'm going to be posting a little bit of public work there for Swish Theory, and maybe for myself on a Substack to be determined. And otherwise, doing some work for the Mexico City Capitanes. Watch some Capitanes games if you can, and that's it.
Yeah, so you can find me at Cayden and ATL, and I post articles at the Center Hub and on my own Substack. So everything is in my in my description, so you can find me there.
Yeah, both these guys are doing great work. I love both of their writing. Please make sure you show them a bit of love to encourage them to keep putting out great work, because it's some of the best in the space. And again, thank you all so much. I hope you all enjoyed the episode. See you in the next one.